Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nathan, and today I want to show you how I use compression after filter automation on an element in my track so that it sits better in the mix as it rises up and it becomes more forward. Now, this style of compression is really important for when you have a lot of elements are rising to create this kind of crescendo effect. That's really when this is really helpful, because when you have all these elements that are fighting for, space, and the volumes are changing and everything because the filters are opening up, which is your bread and butter automation that everybody does, you want that kind of control. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the element that we're dealing with here. I'm actually going to turn our compression off. You'll notice I turned two tools off. I have FabFilter Pro C, and then I have Virtual Mix Rack, which actually has a limiter in there. So I have compression going into limiting, and I'll explain why I did that later, because it's a really good technique to use fairly often, not all the time, because you don't really want to use limiting too much. But what we're going to do is we're going to play the melody that I'm talking about so you can hear it, and then I'll show you how it sounds with the entire mix as this compression is enabled. Okay, so it's pumping a little bit because I have a gate here. So since we have all these reverbs, I don't want to wait for them to diminish so that I can start talking again. But, so the melody is just low in volume. We're going to play the entire mix with it the way it is now, and then I'll enable these compressor and this limiter, and you'll hear how it just brings it more forward, gives it more consistency in volume. There's a problem over here. All right, cool. So let us play everything. And we'll start with the limiter and the compressor, or the compressor and the limiter bypassed, and then you can hear how it affects everything. So my main gripe with that is, up until bar 59, you can't really hear this. And obviously you could fix that with volume automation, but there were a few adjustments I wanted to make to this sound. Number one being that because it's a plucky sound, when it's filtered down, that pluck you can't hear it as well, because the filter is cutting off those high frequencies, which are largely responsible for your being able to tell that it's plucking. So what we can do is we can restore some of that lost pluck by using compression with an open attack that lets whatever part of the transient is left over come through, and then use a high ratio, turn the threshold down. So we're going to play everything again, and we'll enable this compressor and the limiter together so that you can hear the total effect. And what that should do, by the way, is that between bar 49 and 59, it should become more present, and you can always go back and A/B those so that you can hear the difference. Okay, so bear with me a little bit here, because The reason you might be thinking, well, that's just pointless. He could just volume automate it. The reason that I have a compressor going into a limiter, and by the way, I do volume automate these things. And the reason that I'm doing the compression is so that I have the exact control with my volume automation that I want. And the reason for that is because the compressor is restoring some of our transient. It's giving it that pluck. And when the filter really starts to open up, that pluck becomes too loud. The transient part of it is too much. So it needs to be tamed. So I just follow it with a limiter. And what the limiter does is it cuts just the part of the sound that's too loud. It just tames it down while also making the entire, the average volume of this melody all the way from bar 49 to 73, it pretty much makes it the same average volume. So because the volume has now been averaged out, it's the same. I now, not only do I have filter automation, that's exactly the way I want, it sounds the way I want, then I can add a separate gain plugin, which I have here, and I can automate it. So because I know that the volume of this sound is pretty much the same over time, when I come here and I go to change, have the volume go up over time, I know that I'm adding volume to the sound in a controllable way. Whereas if I, just relied on gain reduction to achieve the effect that the compressors is contributing to, the gain reduction would likely have to start, it would have to start up here. And then as the filter opens up, the sound would become louder. So I'd have to, put the volume automation down like that around bar 59 where it picks up. And then because I want it to rise again, I'd have to do that. So that for me, just, it creates too many variables that aren't predictable enough for me. So that's why I rely on compression. Compression makes it more predictable. So we're going to restore that back to its original form. And so that's the point of using compression on a filter and then following it with a limiter. The limiter, you find that you use limiters a lot after compression. I mean, like not all the time, but use it often enough when you want that extra bit of control over the volume of your sound. You just want to level that sound out. And I'm using for that, I'm using the Slate Digital FG116, which is it's based on some old-fashioned compressor that people who make rock music are all about. In fact, I almost never use this compressor because he has other versions he released of this that actually sound way better, but I don't need them. I have enough compressors, and you really only need to master about 2. So that's the effect. It's a really useful thing to do because it gives you the added level of control. More importantly, what it's actually doing, what you're not seeing, is that because this element is highly compressed, I actually have a lot of elements around it that are not compressed. They're not treated. They're just like this rhythm element that's playing with it. Has internal compression on the sound, but that's just the original sound. But I'm not really touching any of the elements around it. So because this is constant and it's a driving element and I want it to be the main thing, I do the compression and the limiting, which is akin to what you would do to vocals. If you want your vocals to poke out, you would compress your vocals to high heavens, and then everything around it would be a little more tame. So you have that nice contrast. So it's a bit of an advanced technique, but you'll find some uses for it. Let me know what you guys think. Leave some comments below if you have any questions. I look forward to reading them. And I'm going to get into the next tutorial here. Some pretty cool stuff to do today. So have a good one, guys.